This is Corporate Warrior, high-intensity training lifestyle and business with Lawrence Neal, helping you improve your health and physique, become a great personal trainer, and start and grow your hit business.
This episode is brought to you by ARX, the most innovative, efficient, and effective all-in-one exercise machines I have ever seen. I was really impressed with my ARX workout. The intensity and adaptive resistance was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I love how the machine enables you to increase the negative load to fatigue target muscles more quickly, and I love how the workouts are effortlessly quantified. The software tracks maximum force output, rate of work, total amount of work done, and more in front of you on screen, allowing you to compete with your previous performance to give you and your clients real-time motivation. The ARX uses a computer-controlled motor to give you the exact amount of resistance your clients need 100% of the time. This means that the resistance can never become dangerous, is intuitive and simple to use, and can provide you with all of the results you and your clients are looking for in a fraction of the time. ARX is highly effective and efficient in delivering all of the benefits of exercise, including increased strength, muscle mass, cardiovascular conditioning, bone mineral density, and injury recovery. As well as being utilized by many high-intensity trainers to deliver highly effective and efficient workouts to their clients, ARX comes highly recommended by world-class trainers and brands, including Bulletproof, Tony Robbins, and Ben Greenfield Fitness. To find out more about ARX and get $500 off install when you place an order, please go to arxfit.com and mention Corporate Warrior in the How Did You Hear About Us field. So again, to get $500 off install when you order, head on over to arxfit.com and enter Corporate Warrior in the How Did You Hear About Us field. Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to corporatewarrior.co. Merry Christmas to you and happy holidays. I'm actually coming at you at this moment from Tralee, Kerry in Ireland. That's County Kerry in Ireland. I'm here for holidays, staying with my girlfriend's mother in her lovely warm home in Kerry. And hence why the audio might sound a bit strange right now, because I'm actually recording this using the inbuilt mic in my MacBook Pro. I actually got these really cool AirPods, these Apple AirPods for Christmas, which seem to be wonderful in lots of different applications. But for some reason, GarageBand does not like me using these to actually record audio. So I struggle with that a little bit, and hence why I'm using the built-in MacBook mic for this recording, since I do not have my trusty microphone. But anyway, on to this episode. My guest today is Kyle Recchia. Kyle is the COO for The Perfect Workout, who are the largest studio or high-intensity training studio business in the US, with around 70 studios at the time of this recording. As Chief Operating Officer, Kyle's role includes managing the senior management team, the continuous improvement of operations, overseeing company finances, and much, much more. His role within The Perfect Workout is very important and covers many, many bases. So I'm really scratching the surface with that description there. Kyle and I share a strong mutual interest for productivity. And I was fascinated to learn how Kyle uses productivity principles like batching, Pareto's law, or otherwise known as 80-20 principle, and GTD, which is the getting things done methodology, for maximum output in his role as COO for The Perfect Workout. Many of the strategies and tactics shared by Kyle and I in this podcast will help you become more effective and productive in your personal and professional life, and even better if you're in a high-intensity training context, since we do obviously talk about this within a high-intensity training business context for the most part. So this is particularly useful if you are a business owner, manager, or trainer who is looking to be more productive. I should also mention that Kyle is a member of the Hit Business membership. This is an online service I have designed to help you start and grow your high-intensity training business with lots of content, exclusive content on every aspect of growing the business you can possibly imagine, including sales, marketing, retention, how do you save money on exercise machines, how to communicate effectively with your clients to generate more word of mouth, referrals and sales and retention, and so on and so forth. The reason I also bring that up is Dana Wiltshire, who is the Director of Culture for The Perfect Workout and Kyle's colleague, has kindly contributed content on leadership and coaching to the membership, which I think if you are in the HIIT business industry, you will find particularly valuable. So they are both members in the membership, and obviously I would love for you to join as well. And so if you're interested in that, please go to corporatewarrior.co. Back to the episode. So a couple of the things that we talk about in depth in this one include how to recruit great people in your business, how Matt Hedman, who's the CEO and founder of The Perfect Workout, and Kyle heavily rely on the GTD system to build and grow The Perfect Workout. And we talk about productivity principles and tactics to help you get ahead in business, like batching, prioritization, and email management, and much, much more. If you're really into productivity, you are going to find this incredibly interesting. If you're not, you might find it a little boring, if I'm completely honest, because we do very much get into the weeds on productivity in this one. If you like the show notes, please go to corporatewarrior.co/Kyle. That's Kyle. And without any further ado, I give you Kyle Recchia. Kyle, welcome to Corporate Warrior.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks,
Good.
Lawrence.
No, you're most welcome. And it's a real pleasure to finally get to talk to you on the podcast. I've wanted to do this for a while. It's a real treat for listeners too, I think, because, you know, The Perfect Workout really are one of, if not the leading high intensity training business. So there's so much we can learn from your company and you and the way your mindset towards business and time management and things like that. I'd love to just kick this off by talking about your own journey and your own career, because you're young, right? I think we're the same age. You're 31, aren't you?
31.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I was shocked when you told me that because, you know, you're obviously very senior position within the business. You're COO in The Perfect Workout. That's right, isn't it?
Yep,
yeah.
That's it.
So I'd love to hear, you know, how did you get to this point? So talk to us about your career.
Yeah. So how far back do you want me to go? You know,
well,
as a baby?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So long story short, I guess, my career has kind of evolved over the past few years, because I started off, I've had a billion different jobs in sales and door-to-door sales, you name it, and communications, et cetera. And I don't actually have my degree. So I kind of started working at a young age and trying out different jobs and different careers. And there's a ton there. And so at some point I realized, you know what, I need to go get my degree and get some schooling under my belt. And I want to do that in the health and industry, or medical field, actually. So I started going to school to become a life flight paramedic, just because I thought it would be cool. And I knew that the compensation was relatively high, so because I can be given my money. And anyways, it wasn't too long into that journey that I realized I just didn't want to be on that side of the medical industry. You know, I wanted to get more into the preventative side. And I've always had to sort of pay for school and college and those things myself. And I was like, hey, unless I'm enjoying this, or unless I see that it's going somewhere, you know, I'm not going to waste my time and money. So anyways, I got into that and went and got my NASM certificate, National Academy of Sports Medicine, to do personal training, and started doing some personal training at some country clubs and just different things like that here and there. And then that led me, and there's some things in between this, but that led me to try to start my own business a few years ago. And it was going to be sort of a health-related online retail business, you know. So anyways, and it was geared towards selling healthy products to help people sort of become the best versions of themselves. And then we kind of had a little give back aspect to that, sort of like Tom's and Blake Mikowski and things like that. Anyways, I always refer to it as a wild failure, but I mean that in a good way. And because I spent a year on that, all of our savings, everything, and it just went nowhere. And so anyways, at the end of that journey, my wife and I were like, look, I'm going to have to find something that's a little more stable. We had just had a baby that was now, like 9 months old.
How old are you at this point? Just to put us in on the timeline there.
Yeah, so I'm 31 now, and that was about 4.5 years ago. Okay. So 26, 27, yeah. And so it was really it was really humbling for me because I, without a degree and not wanting to kind of go out there, and I was a little burned out from trying so hard on some of these things. I didn't really want to go out and continue to be an entrepreneur and at that time and build my own personal training type, clients. And so I looked on Craigslist and was like, I tell you what, I'm just going to find a part-time job doing something that at least interests me. So I looked on the fitness side and I found that this company called The Perfect Workout was expanding to Texas. And they had this sort of clever ad that was like, hey, no experience necessary, even though I had experience. And I was like, this should be a no-brainer, So I found The Perfect Workout, went and applied and told them I would only work part-time and no nights and no weekends. And they said, well, we only have full-time available and you have to work nights and weekends. And so I was like, well, I tell you what, I really believe in the method that they have and what they're doing. So we do super slow strength training. And so I got on board at that time. And that's been about 4.5 years or so. So.
I'm just curious, that's interesting because you went in with these are my requirements. I want to work these hours. So it sounds like you were pretty blown away by maybe something they said or the way they said it in the interview. Do you remember like what it was that? Because I'm assuming you didn't have a workout when you were there.
Right. Well, exactly. No, it was actually at the time, we don't do this anymore. They did hiring seminars. So a whole bunch of us would come in the room together and they would just talk about the company and what they were going to do and things like that. Yeah. Right.
So you really bought into, was that like a kind of a core value presentation, that type of thing, was it? Or?
Yeah, it was a lot about Matt and the company and the method and things like that. And the two things that I remember standing out, one, I had tried many different things. This is sort of a theme about my character. When it comes to jobs or diets or nutrition or exercise, I feel like I've tried almost all of them because it's sort of like I've got to experience it myself, before I find out whether or not I can kind of believe in it or move forward. And so, the method made a lot of sense to me. Before that, I had been doing a little bit of CrossFit stuff and it didn't feel great, on my joints. And I had seen the injuries that were happening. And so the method just made a lot of sense and the science made sense behind it. And I've always enjoyed the science, even when I was going to a little bit of school to get into the medical side. The thing that fascinated me the most was the anatomy and physiology, and kind of the science behind it and how things really work. But I'm also what I would refer to as an opportunist. And so I saw that, hey, this is a company that's growing, they're expanding, there seems to be lots of opportunity. Leanne is somebody that is a regional manager for us now, and she was putting on the presentation at the time, and she was talking a little bit about her journey and the fact that she was sort of evolving in the company and growing relatively quickly. And I thought, man, this could be a huge opportunity for myself too. So to be honest, that was actually a big thing that got me really interested.
This is very interesting. A couple things that come to mind are you're only 31 and you've clearly progressed really fast in the business. And it's interesting because I made the assumption in my head, Carl must have joined The Perfect Workout when he was 18 to get this far in this amount of time in such a quick fashion. But that's not how it's turned out for you at all, which just is even more of a testament to your effectiveness, The other thing that comes to mind is core value presentation, that inspired you, and that I'm sure The Perfect Workout have got an enormous return on hiring you. Now, that's such a common theme across the successful high-intensity training businesses I've had on here. Discover Strength did exactly the same thing. Rock Solid Fitness, in Florida, they do the same thing. They have this core value presentation or interview at the start. And I think that's so critical. And I think the mistake some of the businesses make in this industry is they don't have that defined. They haven't actually sat down and figured out what are our core values, what's our mission statement. Because I get it. To a lot of businesses, they probably don't realize, it's probably, I think the way it comes across in business sometimes as being quite cliche and not useful, but it's so far from the truth, isn't it? It's so important. If you're not, and this better than me and probably better than most people, is if you're not consistent with those core values throughout your organization, it's just you're not going to be as effective in getting the right people, keeping the right people, communicating, being consistent in your services, all of that stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And I agree a lot with the David Allen stuff, which I know we'll probably talk about a little bit later.
Oh, yeah.
But those core values are really sort of the how-to to your vision. And if you do a good job of painting a picture of where you're headed and what your vision is, you're going to get the right people. And then those values, can kind of guide the ship from there. And there, it kind of goes deeper. And I believe that in people's personal life too. And so, yeah, if you're recruiting and you're hiring, and if you're looking for people and you're just trying to fill a role and they come on board and they don't have a clear picture of where you're headed, it's not going to work out, right? And you're wasting your time because a large percentage of those people are going to be on a different page than you are. So I agree. Yeah, it's definitely a staple when it comes to recruiting successfully.
So, okay, so you had this before you joined the Perfect Workout. You had this business. It's quite interesting actually because we've got quite similar background in a way. In that, I've tried various online businesses in the past that never worked out. I've wasted, I say wasted, you feel like you learned something, right? So it's not completely wasted, but I feel like I've wasted hours and hours and hours trying to build something that never worked. So talk to me about that failure. How did you, I guess you've already spoken to this a little bit in that you went on Craigslist and found this opportunity, but is there anything else that you learned from that failure that has really served you, or any other failures that come to mind in your journey that have really helped to kind of mold the person you are now, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like everything that I've done in many aspects, if you want to use that word, has been a failure, whether it was starting school and not finishing, or starting specific careers and not continuing in those careers, or different businesses, etc. It's kind of interesting. I have a granddad, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, so I hope I don't lose my train of thought, but he has been a mentor of mine for a long time, and he got his PhD in education, used to teach nuclear medicine at Duke University. I mean, is really into education and things like that. But he actually stopped using his degree, stopped his education, and got into an entrepreneur business that ever since I can remember, since I was a little kid, he was never in the education, didn't use his degree, and just was in his own business. And so I grew up sort of valuing that life is full of opportunities, and if you want something and you're going after it and it doesn't work out, you have two options. Just give up and feel like the victim, or keep seeking. And I think that a lot of times it boils down to what you believe about yourself as a human being. And if you believe that fundamentally, and I believe this about all human beings, that fundamentally, we live in a world that is full of opportunity, and that just because you don't succeed at something, or just because you don't do, you launch a project and it fails, or it actually does something negative compared to positive, that you don't put the judgment on yourself as if, I wasn't good enough, or I failed, or whatever the case may be. But so I feel like there's always more, not only more to learn, but so when I came, I would be lying if I wasn't disappointed in many of these areas, like that business. I did feel like a failure. I came out feeling beat up because I was married at the time. I had a young baby. I felt like, okay, I'm the breadwinner here. I'm supposed to be the provider, and here I am looking for a job online, and I've gone through our savings and all kinds of stuff. But again, I always feel like going into the next chapter or the next phase, it's just another opportunity. And so when I came to the Perfect Workout, one thing I realized about Matt Hedman was that he really truly listened and cared about the people that were in his company. And so I remember early on, he came to Houston and was just picking our brains and asking us about stuff. And I thought, you know what? He created a safe place for this. I'm just going to be, one of our core values is candor. And so I was sort of like, if this guy really believes in candor, I'm just going to be super candid and talk about the things that I think need to be better or different or improved. And there were so many things that during that time that I was working on that business, because I didn't have the funds or the resources to outsource any of the things that I needed to do, I had to learn how to build a website, myself, how to use accounting software myself, how to get into marketing stuff myself. And it was a lot of those stuff that people would, including myself, would say, I failed at those things. Those were the exact things that I was able to bring to the Perfect Workout and utilize,
it's great.
Value. Yeah.
No, it's a great mindset you have. And I think, I often think that, people are in no worse circumstance than you are in some of those times in your past, but they just react differently. And they see obstacles, whereas you see, or they see, you both see obstacles. You both see things hurdles you need to get around, but they make excuses as to why they can't, as you go, how am I going to do this?
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
And I think that's just such a stark contrast between the two different groups of people who think, it just comes back to mindset. So how did you, if you joined the Perfect Workout only 4 years ago, how did you manage to, climb the ranks, so to speak, so quickly and get into the position you're in now?
Yeah. So, well, one thing that comes to mind, which is kind of funny because it's a super just specific example, but it's, is I knew I want to make sure that I'm adding value and also standing out. And how can I add value to this company aside from just coming in as a personal trainer and being a great personal trainer, et cetera. And so I was taking a look at their systems, like their certification processes, their training processes, and things like that. And from my perspective, it was really just inefficient, and there were things that could have been improved on. And so rather than kind of putting together this presentation, and I mentioned it to Matt, and he was like, very interesting. Yeah, we could, maybe we could look at something like that, or feel free to head down that path of improving our certification process and how we would do that, moving it to an online process that was more accessible by trainers and things like that. So, in my time outside the studio, I just went home and did it, and was like, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to build it out without sort of permission, or and then I'll take it to Matt and present it to him. And I think that was a big moment for myself and for Matt, because he saw, hey, this person can add value and actually really truly does care about things outside of just the day-to-day role, So yeah, that started my conversation and my experience with Matt. I always had really good sales numbers. That probably didn't hurt, but I have some experience in sales. And I'll tell you what, the other thing that I want to point to, and I mentioned this a moment ago with my granddad, is another thing that I've always focused on when it comes to being successful is you have to have good mentors. And so when I was trying to build that business, I had a really, really good mentor. And even though it wasn't what I would say is the right mentor as far as how to build a business, it was the right mentor as far as a support and a friend that was there for me, that was there to lift me up, to keep me moving. Like I said, my granddad, I've really looked up to most of my life as a mentor. My mom growing up, she didn't have a degree. She owned multiple businesses and ran an herb store. And so that was probably got me into the nutrition side when I was younger. And so when I came to the Perfect Workout, I met Dana Wiltshire, who's now our director of culture. And she actually hired me alongside the regional manager at the time, but she was local in Houston where the regional manager was remote. And so I worked closely with her. And this is a girl that, she is so unique in her passion and energy. It's unmatched. And so I discovered, you know what? This girl is not only so positive, so talented, so energetic, but she just gets it. And so I just clinged onto that, built a relationship with her, followed her steps, did everything that she said to do. And that's something I was thinking about earlier, is I can think back about many areas of my life and moving forward. And every single time, it was a lot of it was about having the right mentor. And now Matt Hedman is probably the best mentor I think anybody can have. He's just a genius. And so I lean on him, really heavily.
Do you talk daily?
No, we talk. So it's kind of funny. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But Matt, you can't call Matt. You can't text Matt. You can call him, but it only goes to voicemail. He doesn't do email. So we actually have scheduled times every week we talk about 2 hours a week, I think, on average. Maybe 3 hours a week on average, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. You said you didn't have a system in place. I believe it's for the certifications or something along those lines that you went home and created. What did you create and how?
Yeah, so when I came in, they said, okay, here's our certification. And it was a really great certification, but they handed me this giant binder full of paper. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know where to start. And also, I'm not quite sure. In today's tech world, it's why do I have to carry this giant binder around? Can't this be more accessible? And they also handed me a bunch of DVDs and CDs. And I was like, who even has a DVD player these days, and CDs and stuff like that? So anyways, the first thing was, and there were some other aspects, like a lot of our resources were just sort of online in Google Docs and things like that. And I joke sometimes by saying I'm lazy enough that I'm constantly looking for ways of improving my own efficiency so that I don't have to work too hard, And I say I joke because I like being productive, and I'm always all about getting things done. But so that was one of those things that I was like, hey, I'm not going to be in front of my DVD player. I don't even think I have one. And if that's the case for me, it's got to be the case for many people. So we could probably get a lot more efficient on having these resources online, having them in a way that's easy, sorted more accessibly and things like that. So, yeah.
So what you
that answers your questions.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to picture exactly what you did. So did you put them online, put them on some software? How did you actually do that? Do you remember?
Yeah, so I learned a little bit about WordPress, trying to start my online business. Yeah, and then I was like, "There's a few things about this that I don't know." But again, if you don't know it, you can just figure it out, whether it be talking to somebody or YouTube or something like that.
Google.
Right? Everything's on YouTube, exactly. So I reached out actually to a vendor that Matt knew at the time, that just asked, pick his brain a little bit about how can we get an online website that is password protected and things like that. And he answered a couple of questions. And then I just went home and took the Word doc that we had and took all the other Word docs that we had for all of our other resources and started building out this website and,
wow.
Dividing it up by resources and certification and tools and things like that. And just kind of went at it.
So do you still use that website now in your business?
We do. In fact, we're actually in the process of revamping it and rolling out a new version as we speak. It should come out the next week or two. Yeah.
I'm assuming, is that private, only available to employees?
Right. It's I think referred to as an intranet. Right.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. I love that. I love that intuition. Intuition is the wrong word. Initiative. That's the word I'm looking for.
Sure.
I think that's it. You've got to, it's just so clear to me. It's no surprise to me is what I'm trying to say. Hearing you, why you've been able to achieve what you have, because you've kind of decided or found what you're interested in, forgotten about the money, forgotten about everything else, and just pursued it, because it's almost like you understand, well, if I can find work I love or find a company I really believe in, everything else will kind of come,
Right. Exactly.
And you found that, and then you're like, well, it's worth me investing for free to do this thing in my own time because I know it's going to yield, I just think this is stuff which is you have to be willing to do if you want to be successful,
Exactly.
And by successful, I guess I'm talking about being fulfilled in your work / the money you want to make and everything else, and the personal development, the mentors, the network, everything,
Yeah, I totally agree. And that was the one thing that I said when I looked on Craigslist was even if this thing is not going to be the end all be all for myself, I've made the mistake too many times of getting into different career paths based off of the potential that it had for finances, right? Or going to get a certain degree because I thought it would help me make more money. And it just doesn't work. Even though I get passionate about certain things and I am driven by success and monies and things like that. And it's just when times get hard, which happens, right? It's not going to work unless you truly actually care about what it is that you're doing and you're passionate about what it is that you're doing. And so that worked for me at the Perfect Workout. And I feel like ever since, it's been a long journey, and there's been huge challenges, probably more than I've seen in other areas of my life, but they don't feel that large or that bad because it's just, at the end of the day, something I care about,
This is,
so yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I'm going to stop talking, let you talk a bit more in a minute. But I remember having conversations with friends in London, and I was in sales in London, as you probably know. I had lots of friends and colleagues who were in sales, and a lot of the time the focus was on if they were getting the next job. It was like, okay, where can I get the most money? It wasn't, do I enjoy IT? And invariably the answer was no. Those that did enjoy IT actually, well, no surprise, did really, really well and are happier in their work. I used to say to people, because I feel like I kind of realized what we're talking about fairly early on, maybe in my mid-20s. So people would say to me, oh, Lawrence, what should I do? Where should I go work? And I'd say, well, what do you want to do? So you want to do sales? Great. What are your interests? and then start trying to ask them to shortlist companies that actually aligned with their interests. Because I said, who cares about the basic or the OTE, the on-target earnings?
Right.
So I don't know what that means. You will make more money over the long term if you find a company whose mission and values you really resonate with you, rather than going to stay in IT, get an extra 20 grand on your basic, but you just go to work wanting to like kill yourself, and and you have no motivation to actually sell the product. So to me, I guess people maybe listen to that and think, well, that's common sense, but it just amazes me how many people they're so short-sighted. They're like, right, I have financial stress now, I just need to get X, Y, Z. It's like, well, I just think that's the wrong decision in a lot of cases. So.
Yeah, I agree. And it sounds cliche. I agree with you that it even sounds cliche, because I've heard that too. Like if you do something that you're passionate about, the money will follow, blah, 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 blah. And sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. But, maybe I'm passionate about something that doesn't feel as if you can actually go out there and be successful at it. But the truth is, at least in my experience, it will happen, because again, at the end of the day, what you really want to be doing is adding value to the company that you're in, or to the position that you're in, or the role that you're in. And the best way to add value, especially when you're going to fail 9 times out of 10, especially when you're learning, I know nothing except for the things that I learned from other people, from books, from mentors. And so if you're going to be in that process and you're going to stick with that process, you absolutely have to be in the middle of something that means something to you, right?
Yeah. And, on this kind of topic and theme of being candid, you were talking about how important candor is, or how it's a core value in your business. I'm quite happy to say, I used to earn a lot more money than I earn now in IT sales. I had, I was probably set to earn over 6 figures before I left. But I was never very passionate about what we sold. I was passionate about meeting people and meeting very intelligent people and building those connections. That was really fun. And I enjoyed the process of sales and helping a business. That was cool. But the actual product and industry wasn't that interesting to me. And I took a huge hit financially, when I left London in the UK to move to Ireland to start my own business, which was bringing in at the time $400 a month, I think at the time. And still even now it's a very, very frugal living at the moment. And that's totally fine, because I'm doing something that I enjoy and I can see an enormous amount of opportunity and potential long term. And I'm part of this really exciting community and industry that I'm helping to grow. And it's just work that fulfills me. And, I'm fortunate in that I suppose I made this decision when I don't have a mortgage, I don't have children. So I have a bit more flexibility than some people. But it's just to say that you find a way that works for you. I mean, you can always, obviously, I could have done this as a sideline longer until it made enough revenue that I could switch over and transition. But I was just like, well, I'm not really happy doing my day job. And, the listeners will know this, but, my partner wanted to move to Ireland and was indifferent about, well, not indifferent. She was quite happy to move basically and leave London. And I thought, you know what, let's just do it. And there are days when I'm like, no, I miss that big salary, even though my cost of living was much higher there. I mean, more than double. But it's just playing the long game.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. And playing the long game is, I don't think you could have said it better than that. I mean, and the truth is, like, at least for me, and I'm going to be really transparent right now. When I started getting to a place where I was making better money again, there were still things to even learn there in my own finances and things. So I tended to be broke at a different level, because I hadn't budgeted right or things like that. So a few years ago, my wife and I built a custom house, and we lived in it for a few months, and then we decided to sell it and move on to some property that our family owns, and really just get rid of almost everything. And this is recent. We're still in the middle of this process, because we were like, sometimes I ask this question, what about my life do I want to be different? Or when you sit down and kind of think about where you're headed, what's going on in your life, what's making you uncomfortable? And for most people, they've put things in their lives that they feel like this is the absolute reason why I can't do something. And that's true. So I have this quote at the end of my email that is like my favorite quote of all time, which is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, right? And so for me, it's always sort of been like, it's going to be true if you feel like it's true, that you can't start a business, that you can't go through this because you have a baby or because the finances are too hard or because of the budgeting or whatever. But it's also true if you decide that you can do those things, if you decide that you can, So again, that might sound a little cliche or unscientific, but it's always turned out for me. Yeah,
it's great, and it's I think some of the corny, sayings and cliches are very true, and that's one of those. And that's really interesting. So look, I'm going to try and shut up a little bit and ask some better questions. And I'm really excited to talk to you about time management, which sounds really nerdy, but that's fine because I know that you're into that too. Getting things done. Fantastic book. I've had David Allen on the podcast. Good guy. Very interesting guy. I like getting things done. I like some of the concepts from that book and from that framework. I've implemented them into my own life. I'd love to hear how you've taken that and evolved it and implemented it into your own life. We can start there and then just dive in with questions.
Okay, yeah. So when I started working here, it wasn't too long that once I was able to have some conversations with Matt, I was like, how in the world are you the CEO of the company, the COO of the company, the CMO, marketing operations, everything? How are you all of these things? And how do you do it so efficiently and effectively, not only when it comes to specific metrics and KPIs, but even the intangible stuff like showing up to Houston every year and remembering my child's name, when I'm one of 200 employees and stuff like that. It blew me away. And his one answer, and for the people that know Matt, is he is probably the most literal person I've ever met in my life. So he's one of those people that when he says something, that is exactly what he means, And so when he said, he basically answered the question by saying, I think it was 8 years ago, I found Getting Things Done by David Allen. And if I hadn't found that system and fully implemented it into my life and into our business, we would absolutely not be where we are today. And so even though, like I said, I hadn't really finished school and I barely finished high school, I have an incomplete math. I mean, it's just sort of I couldn't be more uneducated when it comes to the schooling system. I have also always believed in reading and self-development and learning. And so I try to read, 2 to 4 books a month and things like that. So anyways, when he said that, it resonated with me. And so I went and picked up the book. And he was also really adamant about, this is definitely not one of those books that you can just read through quickly, feel like you got the concept, implement one aspect of it and be done. So I took it more of a sort of like a textbook, right? I need to read it and then I need to study it and I need to implement it. And then Matt and I set up a system where we really spent at least half an hour a week for the next year talking about GTD and sharpening each other's saws, so to speak. And, so he was a big mentor in that.
Okay. So can you elaborate on that and give us what an average day looks like for you and how you kind of manage your time?
Sure. Yeah. And I should also say, and I know I can be all over the place with this stuff, but
it's okay.
David Allen has a couple of other books. And so the thing I think that most people don't understand about time management or getting things done is that it's very much a philosophy as well as a system, right? So there are the how-tos, how to process your in-basket, how to do a weekly review, and we can talk about all that stuff. But there's also sort of, why are you doing this and with what mindset and framework are you doing it within, And so I didn't discover the philosophy side, so to speak, until I read his other books and I started discovering, wow, you really have to put a lot of this into a higher level of thinking rather than just saying, David Allen said that you could break your to-dos into 2-minute items, or you could break them into contexts like calls. And so when I'm in a place to do phone calls, it's more efficient. I got it, and let me just leave it from there. So it's so much more than that. So I almost forget the question you asked me there because I kind of
it's all right. I was just interested to see how you, I hear what you're saying. There are higher level principles that are the most important thing. I'm one of the issues I did have with getting things done is this and maybe this is short-sighted of me, and he probably explores this in his other work more so, but it's this focus on efficiency over effectiveness. We have to be very careful to not pick the wrong things to do, because being efficient at something that's not worth doing is very unproductive, as I'm sure you know. So, the question was really, what does your average day look like, and how do you organize your day?
Yeah. So, I think the most important thing about getting things done is what David Allen teaches on the weekly review. And then that can also be a monthly review and a quarterly review. And when I do that weekly review, I do it personally and professionally. And I look at what I think David Allen calls the 50,000 foot view. So it's sort of like, what is the vision? What is my personal mission statement in this company as a chief operating officer, et cetera? What's my personal mission statement as a human being, as a dad, as a husband, all that kind of stuff. And then, okay, so if that's my mission statement, that's where I'm headed. And so what are the values I have? Because the values are sort of the guidelines. Like he says, if you're going to throw a birthday party for someone and they say, yeah, I give you permission to go through that party for me and you can handle all of it. However, here's the parameters. I want to make sure that it's got this theme, it's done, these people are invited. So those are sort of like the framework, that helps guide the ship. And to me, that's where your values are. So again, I've got my personal set of values. We've got our company values. And so when I sit down to look at my weekly review, I'm looking at those things first. And then as you start to land the plane, the 50,000 feet, 40,000 feet, 30,000 feet, you're still higher up when you're looking at your projects. Which of these projects are going to get us, are going to have the highest impact on our business 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Which are the largest levers to pull when it comes to whether it be revenue or company culture or you name it, right? So looking at the projects with that framework, and then of course you can start to get further down. What are the action steps that need to happen for that project? What are the things that I have? What are the feedback mechanisms I can use to measure success? But I think a lot of people start with, like you said, just action steps. Like, what do I need to get done? Is it an email? Is it this? And it's like, it's sort of the ant and the elephant principle. You can be running all day as an ant as hard as you can in one direction and making progress. But many times if you don't realize that you're on the back of this elephant that's going in the other direction, you're just doing it with, you know what I mean? With
I love that.
Super ineffectively. So, yeah.
I've not heard that analogy. That's really true and a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to make sure that my, if that answers your questions, when I sit down to look at what I'm going to be doing that week or what's most important, sort of the 80-20 rule, and it might sound cheesy, but I start at the top and where we plan to be and where I want to be on my deathbed, so to speak, sometimes. And are these things going to be, and then I work my way backwards. Yeah.
I think that's great. So when do you do the review? Is it like a Sunday night or when do you actually do it?
Yeah. I've changed it over time just because I find that if there were periods that I wasn't doing it well enough, I wasn't spending enough time because, nobody's perfect. And especially, we were talking about that earlier. There's on these podcasts, people can say these things and I can listen to them and be like, wow, this guy's got it. And then the truth is a lot of times it's like, yeah, but it's not like I do this all the time. So, so I've, over the past few years, I really evolved into having my weekly review. What worked best for me was Friday mornings. I kind of end the week and go into the weekend, getting that higher level perspective. And then I come in on Monday and I sort of have my stuff lined out.
Oh, wow. Okay. So Friday morning. So what time? Let's get specific.
Yeah. I'm also a big believer in the deep work principle and, or willpower, that you only have so much willpower in the day. And so Matt and I both, and I've learned all this from Matt, is we really focus on making sure that our meetings are with other people are scheduled later in the day because the real deep work that takes all the willpower needs to be done in the morning. And so for important items like that, that aren't necessarily urgent, but they're definitely most important, I try to do as early as possible. So Friday mornings, I might wake up and do a little bit of routine, do some reading, do some gratitude stuff, whatever the case may be. Sometimes I play my drums just to get my energy going and kind of get, drink 25 cups of coffee. And then I will make that my first thing on Friday. Yeah. My weekly review. Yeah.
And how much, what sort of time block will you give to that?
Usually about an hour and a half or so.
Okay. And that will be, so maybe 9 a.m. start? Is that when that will start or 8 a.m.?
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, 9 to 10:30.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose for you, it's like, well, that is the most important activity of that day, right? So that's why it comes. That's the first thing you do is when you've probably got the most willpower, the most energy to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sort of the clearest mindset. Yeah. I haven't gotten caught up in the emotions of all the fires that pop up on any given day, you name it.
Yeah. And just so people know, the reference that Carl made there, Deep Work, is a book by Carl Newport, which I haven't read, but I need to because it sounds like it's right up my street. But I saw his TED Talk, which I was very, very impressed with. I really feel like he's right about social media.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
In short, his view on social media is that you really don't need to be on it.
Right, exactly.
Obviously, there's some caveats around that. Social media does have its place, but it can be very distracting. I'll be honest, today I have definitely been distracted by social media a large amount, and there's a very clear theme or trend. When I have an unproductive day, social media is normally at the root of the issue. Or some sort of app or service that notifies that interrupts me.
Right. Exactly.
That causes me to task switch and stuff like that, which is, I completely, everything you're saying is so aligned with what I think. And it makes me want to review getting things done. And, cause I've definitely fallen off the wagon with some of the principles, and I want to dig into that with you. So how do you use it in your life in terms of the other steps? So things like in trays and batching and stuff like that. Like, do you use those methods as well? And how do you use those?
Yeah. Another big aspect of getting things done that I think is so important. And sometimes when I talk to people about it, they tend to miss this part. And I'm like, wow, this is where we should start. Is for David Allen, at least, there's a lot of science behind the fact that our minds can't really separate what's super important as far as our memory goes and what's less important. So perhaps I'm trying to remember something that is sort of vital to living life, and my brain at the time might be like, well, you need milk, right? Because it's on the grocery list. It's like, get out of my head. And you can actually only hold on to so many things. So his concept of get everything out of your brain, everything out of your mind, and have it into a system is another place that I think if you can start there and you can start with a good weekly review, you're going to be set off better than most people. And so some of the tools I use is a voice capture device on my cell phone. And I learned that from Matt, and I think it's the most important one because if you don't have a pen and paper on you, or if you're driving, or if you're sitting there with a friend, the truth is you're going to just lie to yourself and say, oh, I'm going to try to remember this, and you're going to forget it, right? And so it may seem kind of nerdy, but there's people kind of laugh and smile, but not a day goes by probably where I don't pick up my phone and say, give me 1 second, and tap that app that allows me to record a voice note and then capture that thought and that idea and then move on from there.
What app is that?
On the iPhone, it's actually called Quick Voice.
Quick Voice.
And the reason I like Quick Voice is because other capturing apps, you have to go in and then you have to click a few different buttons perhaps to start recording. And this one, you can just click record instantly. And again, it's got a...
I love this because do you know what? It comes to me. There's a few things I want to touch on. There is I'm like, because I have my in tray in Evernote, right? And Evernote is a great piece of software. It's just an incredible piece of note taking software because you can index anything. I use it every day. I use it for checklists. I use it for referencing. Now, I have whenever someone says, "Oh, you should read this or watch this," it goes on a list, and then I have a search bar, and I can search the entire archive for anything, and it's just great. However, it's quite slow. It's not even slow. I mean, I'm being unreasonable, but we live in a world where we want there to be as least friction as possible, right?
Right.
So
exactly.
when I follow the same process. I never keep it like that. That was the biggest takeaway for me from GTD was don't keep it in your head, put it down into a system. Because I can't remember. I feel like the number 4 is kind of arbitrary me saying it, but I feel like I remember David saying you can't keep more than 4 things in your head, or is it 8 things or something like that?
Yeah, it's something like that, 4 or 5 or something, yeah.
And most people try and remember and try and hold on to it, or they trust that they will remember and they don't. And this is why most people don't do what they say they're going to do, which is a fact.
Exactly.
And it's go on. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but it's like my brain's going all over the place with this stuff. And it's true, but I want to go back to what you said about friction and he talks a lot about this. If there's something that can add even a little friction, then you're going to become numb to it and not utilize it. And if you become numb to it and not utilize it, your systems are going to fail. So like I literally have a waterproof notepad in my shower because think about the amount of times that your best ideas, they always come whenever you're, not in a place that you really want them to come. Like you're taking a shower and you're like, oh, you know what? This might be how we solve trainer retention. Or maybe this is a new idea for, whatever the case may be, right? And if you don't capture it in that moment, the odds are it might not come back, especially in the way that it was before. So I might capture that and then move it to my voice recorder. And then I might process my voice notes later and put it into sort of my next action items. And then when I'm looking at sort of my weekly review, what things do I need to prioritize and where? Many of those thoughts actually line up with some of the higher level, bigger level, higher impact projects that need to be done. And then, this is another thing Matt always says is like successful business is really all about making good decisions and then implementing those good decisions. And it's really hard to make good decisions if you don't have great systems for option solving those decisions or even capturing the thoughts on those. And then, of course, if you don't have a great system to execute them from there, it's like good luck,
This waterproof notepad, what is that? Is that a particular brand or is that something you constructed? Or
no, I'm going to butcher the name and it's going to sound kind of weird, but I think it's on Amazon. Everything's on Amazon. I think it's called Love Notes or something like that because the people that designed it sort of decided that you can leave little notes in the shower for your spouse or significant other. But ours is always funny. Yeah. And if friends or anybody's ever at the house or cousin or somebody's, sees it, they're like, this is brilliant. But they're also laughing because many times instead of saying, hey, Tiffany, which is my wife's name, I adore you and love you, which I should probably do more often. It's more like, a satellite radio idea for marketing and just little, So yeah, very funny.
No, you're absolutely right though. I always get good ideas in the shower and we all do. And, my partner will often see me like really excited, like running out of the shower because I'm running to write it down somewhere.
Right.
And I have these like, I think they're like called Oxford cue cards. So you can see it there. It's it's just basically, I don't know what the measurement is, but it's a small card. It's small. I don't know how to describe it. Like 3 by 5.
Like the ones you study in, yeah.
Yeah, it's like
study like schoolwork and stuff.
Right, you write cues, or for presentations, you write on cue cards. They need to remind you of what to say. But I have these things everywhere, and I bought them years ago, for when I was writing ebooks as a way to structure them. And now they're just my lists,
right?
and they get thrown into my intro, which is behind there, and they're just littered everywhere. So I just write those down on there. But no, this is interesting. So this concept of so many things come up for me that I've just totally forgotten. That'll probably come back. But you use the concept of the intro, right? And this is something I struggle with because if I have an idea, I've got the discipline to put it into the intro. I struggle to process the bloody thing. And I put that off all the time. And do you know why? It's because it's always my smallest priority of the day. My biggest priority is my main task that's going to, my biggest priority is the task that's the most effective in terms of pushing me closer to my goals, right?
Right.
So that's my priority. And then there's operational stuff, right? If you're a trainer, listen to this, or high intensity training business owner, then you've always got operational. You've always got to be serving your customers. So you have to obviously make time for that. And in my case, I'm serving members in the membership. I'm creating content for them that they require, that sort of thing, or I'm recording podcasts. And so the priority and those things kind of take precedence. Email gets in there sometimes, but then this whole processing of the intro and the waiting for list and the someday maybe list, which maybe is much less frequent, it just gets missed all the time. So mine just grows, and then I think about it a lot because I know it should be done. It stresses me out, and it becomes overwhelming because the list is gigantic. So
yeah, exactly.
I'd love to hear your advice if you have any on that.
I definitely do. And it's because I failed big time at one aspect of it. And it's like we were talking earlier about failure. Most of the time, in my opinion, all humans are capable and we all have the same opportunities. I don't really believe in the outliers stuff because even though you read a book on outliers and it's like, oh, this person happened to, go to school with like Bill Gates and then, he became the CFO. It's like true, but then those stories happen every single day. Most of the time I think people are so negative or shut off to relationships and opportunity that it's the black swan principle. Positive black swans are really everywhere if you're truly looking for it. So anyways, I know I'm rabbit trailing here, but my point is most of the time, if you're feeling that stuff, it's like, okay, well, there's just something else to learn. And what I learned about myself is I am terrible at having a physical in basket because it just doesn't, I'm not always in my office and I don't really like processing physical material. It's so much easier. I'm just, maybe it's because I'm 31 years old, but digital stuff just works better for me. And so I had to learn, well, if I'm not getting better at this, it doesn't mean that I have to, right? I can evolve this to work better for me. And so I capture everything in two ways. One, the voice notes, like I said, and that's a really great way. The other one is on a piece of notepad. But most people will write it down. I have it right here in front of me. Write down all these notes and thoughts, and then they'll throw it in their in basket. And for me, I have to process that at the end of each day, or at the end of this meeting, for example. Otherwise, I know I'm going to throw it in there, and I'm not going to come back to it. So, if there's certain pieces. Because the truth is, we get caught up in those processes, or even as a personal trainer, we get caught up in the to-dos, or let's say I'm handling a phone call, I get caught up in the scripts. But again, it's that ant and the elephant thing. You might be working as hard as you can, but moving in the wrong direction if you don't step back away from the trees and look at the forest as a whole. And that to me is the most important thing that we can do. And it's the thing that we do the least often. Even when you're training a client, it's like, are you going through the steps and the processes? Are you actually looking at this person and your relationship with this person as a whole and their relationship with you? And so we have this saying sometimes you need to stop doing your job, the little to-dos and the admin stuff and the processes, to actually do your job, which is take a broader look at things and make sure you're doing the things that have the highest impact.
This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, ARX. Are you looking to create a cutting-edge, high-intensity training facility? Are you confused on what equipment to use or how to separate yourself from the masses? Well, then ARX Fit might be the answer you're looking for. I asked Mike Polano from ARX a few questions about how ARX machines are challenging the status quo of the exercise industry around the globe. Mike, if you could, give the listeners a quick summary of why ARX is so different from the traditional machines or tools they're used to seeing in most exercise facilities.
ARX is totally different than anything you've seen before. This isn't just another weight stack machine. We've looked at the last 40 years of exercise technology and used that knowledge to create something entirely new. ARX uses a new form of resistance, a motor, and we pair that motor with computer software so that we can maximize the safety, effectiveness, and efficiency of your workouts. So you may be asking, okay, but how does ARX compare to weights? Traditional machines you see in gyms today are based on lifting metal weights and battling gravity. What people don't realize is that when you're forced to lift a static weight like this, one that doesn't adapt or change while you use it, you're underloading yourself rep after rep. And this unnecessarily limits your ability to make improvements. With ARX, we've taken a totally different approach. We removed weights and gravity from the equation altogether. Instead, ARX combines our patented motorized resistance with our custom computer software to provide you with the world's safest, most effective, and most quantified form of resistance training ever. When you train with ARX, you are training to your perfect level of resistance, both positively and negatively 100% of the time. No more guessing what weight to use. ARX does all of that for you, instantly and automatically. We'll also track and measure every second of every rep, so you can quantify all of your workouts to find out if you're improving and by exactly how much. Whether your goals are bigger muscles, increased strength, stronger bones, or just to look good in a bathing suit, ARX can help you achieve all of these and more, but do so in a fraction of the time it would take compared to traditional equipment. If you're looking for the most efficient, most effective, and most quantified piece of exercise equipment on the market today, then look no further than ARX.
Thanks, Mike. That all sounds really impressive. If you'd like to learn more about ARX, visit arxfit.com and mention that you heard about ARX on the Corporate Warrior podcast to receive an exclusive deal of $500 off shipping and installation off your ARX machines. So it's about having some self-awareness, knowing what aspects just aren't going to work for you and adapting. Because and some of the listeners will know this has been a problem for me for a while. I had Ari Meisel, who's like the time management guru, right? Or one of them, or the outsourcing guru probably, on the podcast. And I explained this to him and he said, yep, 8:30 every night. He does exactly what you do. He processes that in tray, I suppose we should call it, every evening. And when do you do it exactly? Like when?
Whenever I'm wrapping up, like let's say, for example, this was the end of the day and you and I were having this meeting and then I had a page full of notes from all my meetings or thoughts, or I was literally eating lunch and something random popped up. Then I go through, and by process it, I mean just get it into your system. And the great thing about GTD is he has the steps for that too. If you can complete the task in 2 minutes, like an email, then I just do it. If it's a thought that is going to become a project, there's more than one action step to it, I add it to my project list, or I add it to a context list, and then it just stays there. And so it's not like I'm actually doing much with this information. I'm just getting into a system so that when I do my weekly review, I actually can see that at the time that I need to see it and then decide what to do next from there. And I agree. It's the same with the waiting list. We talk a lot about, even when it comes to culture, it's sort of funny. We always talk about if people would just do this, or if I could just do this, what you're talking about, then we would be successful. But the truth is, especially when it comes to delegation, or even if you're putting things in your system, making sure that you have appropriate systems in place to follow up on that, in the future is another key to success. So yeah, the waiting list, all that stuff. This is why I love David Allen and getting things done. I preach it and evangelize it more than any other system, because I really feel like he's hit the nail on the head from philosophy all the way down to his systems. There's not really any cracks left,
So do you just so I understand then? So the in-tray, you'll process that at the end of your working day, so before you kind of start your family time. Is exactly. That yeah? Because that's what I need to do, because I really don't want to finish work mode Lawrence, right? Then go into family or partner mode, or relax and play sport or whatever it is I'm doing, and then come back into work mode before bed. That's like the worst thing, the worst idea for me. I do the 5-minute journal thing, but I never do the wrap up, because by that point I've always so I have a terrible habit. If I do work in the evening, I will just do things that are unimportant. I'll like the kind of things that most people do during the day when they feel like they're working. I will do that sometimes in the evening, which is totally counterproductive when I should be reading, relaxing, spending time with my girlfriend, that type of stuff. So I can get caught into that trap sometimes. But I will never, it's funny because I'll never do anything truly, not always, but in most cases, truly important in the evening. It can always wait. And I never do the, so going back to what I was saying, I never do the wrap up of the 5-minute journal. Are you familiar with the 5-minute journal?
Yep, yeah, I've got it.
Okay, yeah, of course you are. So I always do I'm very consistent with the grateful exercise, because it's such a good exercise, and I think it's very effective in terms of writing down a couple of things you're grateful for and really feeling what you're writing down. But then I never do the wrap up. So
yeah, and the truth is, and this is one of my messages to the people that I work closer with is, I like to talk about work-life balance. I know a lot of people like Simon Sinek don't really talk about work-life balance. They're like, it's all one and the same. But I'm like, the truth is, you can categorize everything that you have in life into different categories, whether it be working on the perfect workout, or my relationships with my kids or my wife or my friends, or playing music or drinking wine, or actually making a really healthy meal so I can work on my physique. You name it, right? And so it's important to look at these things like you're talking about when it comes to your business, but also your personal life. If you leave the end of the day, Lawrence, and you have all these tasks, and then you're trying to sit there with your significant other, your mind is still going to be bothered by that stuff, and you're going to be less engaged, because you're like, that you have stuff to process, that you have things left unopened or open-ended still. And so, sometimes David Allen says, if I want to walk outside and I all of a sudden see that there are weeds in the yard and I want to pull those weeds, I can't do that and feel good about it unless I know all of my other things are exactly where they need to be. And once I get back to that thing or that context, they'll be there, they'll be safe, and they'll be wrapped up. And so it's hard to go home and be engaging with my kids or engaging with my wife, which is more important than my career, right? Or to be engaged with my health or my fitness or things like that, which is more important than my career, right? All that stuff, unless I know that when I'm in that context, I don't have the things from, other areas of my life weighing me down. So, yeah.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed is if any of those things are out of whack, if, myself and Ashling are spending enough time together, quality time, if my diet's not right, it all affects everything. It all affects one another and your overall fulfillment. So I think the mistake a lot of people make is they think they can work themselves into a state of happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Or into a state of feeling fulfilled if they just work really hard. It's like, well, no, it's about being productive and implementing some of these productivity principles. I'm a huge fan of Peter Drucker and the Effective Executive. I'm sure you're familiar with that one too. And blocking out those first few hours to focus on that key task that we kind of touched on. And that's that part. But then, I just think it's so important to protect time and cultivate time for working on all mind, body, and spirit, right? Because it all feeds into each other. It sounds, again, somewhat cliche, but it's true. It's like it's amazing. Like when you have, I don't know, a great sexual experience with your partner, or you have a great conversation. Like I find that so fulfilling. And if anything, it just motivates me more. It makes me want to go and create a great future or go and create great work. And when that stuff isn't great because you're not focusing on it, my motivation for my business is nowhere where it should be,
Exactly.
So,
and you own your business, right? But so this example might not apply, but I always think about this. Tomorrow, something could happen where Matt says, which wouldn't happen. He'll probably laugh when he hears this. You know what? Kyle's not adding more value. He's just not going to be a part of the company. And if my whole entire life was wrapped up in that, right? How devastating would that be? Yeah. And on the flip side, if my whole life is wrapped up in that, again, you're so into the forest that you're not really going to be that effective. So about a year ago, I'm a member of a group called Vistage, which is like an executive roundtable mentor group. Yeah. And I realized I've been in it 3.5 years or so, and talk about having good mentors, and I discovered that every time I do my annual sort of offsite with these guys, I'm really happy about where I am professionally, so to speak. I'm not happy where I am in my personal life. And then I was like, if I have a system in place professionally, we call it our vision navigation chart. If it's like, here's our vision for 3 years. Okay, then here's our vision for 1 year. What do we need to accomplish this year to get to that? So here's our major projects. Well, what are all the little outcomes that need to happen within that project? Okay, well, within that outcome, what are all the action steps? And then we break it down into each quarter. And then it's like, okay, what are the metrics and KPIs that will allow us to see whether or not we're heading in the right direction and measure it? And if we do that at a company level, why in the world am I not doing that at a personal level? So this last year, I created a personal vision navigation chart. And it was like, well, if I want to be here when I'm 60, and if these are my values, my wife's, my kids, my relationships, being, debt-free or being wealthy or whatever it is, enjoying music, all these things, what do I need to learn this year to be heading in the right direction? And if that's the case, what are the outcomes that I need to do each quarter? And if that's the case, what are the action steps for those outcomes? And what are the metrics? And I've seen myself, even though it's been a challenging a year for us as a company, because we've done a whole lot of different things. We've reorganized the whole company, a big restructure, all this sort of stuff. I have made more progress in my personal life this year, which has kept my happiness levels and my effectiveness, I think, in the Perfect Workout, because I didn't shy away from, making sure that, again, that the balance wasn't all on the Perfect Workout, if that makes sense. Yeah, it does.
No, that's very cool. Okay, so that concept's worked really well for you from a personal life as well, in terms of what's it called, the navigation.
Yeah, we call it vision navigation. The Traction book, I think, calls it. There's an acronym for it, but it's really sort of like your.
Okay, that's a Gino Wickman book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's. I always remember that as Luke Carlson's favorite, isn't it? I think it's his number one book for high intensity training business owners, but I'm sure it's applicable to all businesses. I'm sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I remember I heard about Traction a lot, but it wasn't until Luke really taught some things on it that I started paying attention, and it's really started to revolutionize our business as well. It's a brilliant book.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So, okay, so for you, so it sounds like you've got quite a lot of self-awareness. You know, you've found for you the physical in-tray. Okay. How do you deal with physical stuff then, like letters, anything like that? So what do you do with that then, if you haven't got a physical in-tray?
Yeah, so I have a physical in-tray, and I'm still, relatively speaking, I'm still bad at it. So that's why I try to avoid it most. When I do my weekly review, this is not so don't do what I'm about to say. But when I do my weekly review, I tend to look at my physical in-tray and in-basket once a week rather than every day. And so I process all my other in-baskets and stuff every day, my email, my notes, my voice notes, etc. I don't get to the physical one until once a week. And even then, there's things in there that need to be turned into sort of a deeper project type stuff, you know, that I might get to less often. However, I find that we do live in a world where it's still easy enough to make things digital, you know. So I bet family members and people like that write me a letter and then it takes me like 3 weeks to get back to it rather than getting back sooner would laugh at hearing this. But yeah, if it's physical, it's going to take me a little bit longer.
I have this in-tray behind. I've got a standing desk I'm talking to you from now, but behind it, I've got an in-tray and it's just hilarious. It's full of crap. And this is funny. I want to say this because I think you'll find it quite amusing if he's listening to this. So Matt, if you're listening, this is Matt Mombaquet, I think that's his last name, who lives in Nova Scotia and works out there. I don't know if you know Matt, Carl. He actually came to the conference in March, the Resistance Exercise Conference. So Aisling made the promise to Matt that we would send him butter from Ireland, because obviously all the butters here is grass-fed and a lot of the butter over in Canada and the US is grain-fed, isn't it? So he wanted, and Ash was like, "Yeah, Matt, we'll send you butter." I'm like, "Ash, shut up. We're not going to send butter." But no, it's cool. So I'm looking at a little cool bag. So this is in March, right? We're in August. We're at the back end of August now, right? So I'm looking at my in-tray and there's a little cool bag on top, which is there because I bought it on Amazon. I now need to go and buy the butter to put in the bag. And by the way, Matt, if you listen to this, I'm not saying this to try and like make you feel guilty or anything like that, because we're going to send you this. But this is a good example of how not to do the in-tray.
Right, exactly.
Because if I were effective and efficient and productive, then I would have done this in April at the latest on my return from the conference. And yeah, the cooler bag is still there on the in-tray, and it's very disappointing. So Matt, if you're listening to this, the butter is on the way, my friend. It is coming.
Hold on to it. Yeah, when you were saying that, I looked at my physical in basket, and there was a presentation from a speaker I heard about a month or two ago that same thing, you know, we're focused on this idea of company culture and all these different things, and that actually directly related to it. But I just haven't gone and processed those slides from the presentation because they're in a physical format, and I have some resistance to it. So that's my weakest part of GTD, I would say, is my physical in basket. I should be doing it more often than once a week, but getting it to once a week has actually been. Actually, you know, I can't even say I do it once a week, right? Because I just said that presentation is still sitting there. So I'll look at it and be like, you know what, next week. So I need to get better about that.
So there's another list in the GTD system called waiting for. So I think we should give some context because some of the listeners won't be familiar with the methodology. So the waiting for list is you're going through so I'll give a little bit of context here. So you've got the in-tray, and then whenever you, and the in-tray is a to-do list of anything that's come up in your head that day, you put it on your in-tray. That could be a digital format or a notepad. And then the idea is that once a day, or a frequency that works for you, it could be once every couple of days or whatever, you process that list and you use a workflow when you go through it. So if it takes 2 minutes, you do it. 2 minutes or less, you do it, right? If it takes longer than that, you delegate. Or you set it as a next action. So you set it as a longer project and you put it in your next action list, you calendar it. What's the difference between calendar it and putting a next action list?
Yeah. So if something, and then there's also the someday maybe that I think you're about to get to, but if something has to happen by a certain date, like our meeting today, it has to be on the calendar. Or let's say I have a deadline and I need to get a legal document out for some employees today, then I put it on my calendar, because the calendar is like, that has to happen.
Yeah.
But then you go through your projects and your next action steps. At least I do this on Fridays, and I flag, this would be fantastic if I could get this done. It's really important. If I could get this done this week after I've gone through the responsibilities I have, on the calendar. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Right. Or it might be something that is less important. You're like, it's a someday maybe item. Like, I want to learn Spanish, and it keeps coming up in your mind. You put it on your someday maybe list,
Yeah, and then the someday maybe you review whatever it's once a quarter, once a month. And then you can pull from that list. I've never actually done that. So I have this mammoth someday maybe list. And it's hilarious because you look at it now, or I look at it now as stuff I put on there years ago, and I'm like, that's ridiculous. I don't even care about that.
Yeah, right.
And then the last action we forgot to mention is delete. So if there's something on your in tray that is no longer relevant or you're not interested in, you can just remove it. But
Right.
Better to have captured it than to regret not capturing it in the first place.
Exactly.
So if you decide to delegate, then you have another list called the waiting for list, right? Which is where you track delegated tasks. So you've got the task, who you delegated to, maybe the deadline, maybe something else, maybe a date maybe a date for when you follow them up or something like that, or check in. Do you have this as well? Do you use that list?
Oh yeah, and I find that it's one of the most. I've said this about every aspect, so obviously the listeners just know that I like GTD, but it's another vital aspect of the system. Otherwise, things are going to fall through the cracks. And it really goes back to the principle of, there's a book by Jerry Faust called Responsible Leaders Get Results. And so many times, if somebody delegates something, it's really easy to then say, well, I talked to so-and-so about that. Let me follow up with them. Or whatever it's like, why didn't this get done? It's like, well, I passed it on to somebody else. And so the waiting list is important because, so for example, if I email Luke Carlson about a question for Matt, and then I will put on my waiting list, email Luke, and I put the date and I put what the topic was. And then when I go through roughly every day in the morning, I'll look at my waiting for list to make sure there's not something time sensitive there. And then look at the date and say, is there, should I ping them again? Because eventually I'm going to get to that conversation with Matt, and I'm not going to be a great, leader or manager if I have the conversation. It's like, well, I asked them, I'm still waiting. It's like, okay, well, who cares? Like, get rid of the excuses. You just need to make things happen. And the best way to do that when you delegate something to somebody is make sure that you follow up on it. And so that's what the waiting list does.
That's interesting, because I use a plugin that I'm not going to recommend at the moment because I'm not sure if it's as reliable as it was, but it's called Boomerang in email.
Yeah.
And you're nodding because he knows it all too well. So I use that to, whenever I send an email out to anyone that I want to follow up on, I use Boomerang, and you can basically set a reminder to have the email put back into your inbox after a certain amount of time, which is so useful because it means you don't have to think about, writing it down to follow up. But in your context, you have to write it down because you have to report it to Matt, don't you?
Right, or anything like that. Exactly. So I might come up with a conversation or somebody, and actually the truth is I don't want to ever get in a conversation with somebody where they have to ask me about what happened with X. I'd rather just come and have had it done.
Yeah.
I really am a big believer in getting a lot of things done. I mean, obviously the 80-20 rule, but there's also, I think, a lot of, I think the principle of getting a lot of things done compared to just the most, I almost hesitate to say this, but there's a lot of good things that come from just getting a lot of things done too, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, so yeah, the waiting list is like the best way to make sure you don't get to those conversations and you're behind on something is to make sure that you are reviewing what's in whose hands,
Right.
Yeah.
So what time do you review that list and how often?
I look at the waiting list every day, once a day.
Yeah.
And I usually, there's a moment in the day that I will process my emails. Oh, I could be better about this too. And on a perfect day, I will process my emails 2 to 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. Like, I wish I could be Matt and not even do emails. And I'm not saying that as an excuse that someday I'd like to get to that point. But in my current role in the company, I feel like there's some benefits to me being at least somewhat more accessible. Again, I don't let calls interrupt me. I don't have my ringer on. I don't have my email open in front of me when I'm doing other projects. I don't have the notifications, on my phone that an email came in. Because I don't want things to pop up and interrupt me. But I will still process them a few times throughout the day. And so when I do emails, I tend to once or twice a day, glance at the waiting for list too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that like a set time in your diary, like 30 minutes in the diary, or you just remember to do it?
Yeah, I think that I've been doing trying to improve the GTD system for myself for a couple years now. So I think it's just one of those, it's become a habit.
How does Matt get away with not using email these days in this day and age?
So it got me. No, I'm just kidding. I think he read gosh, I'm going to butcher this, Matt, but I think he read a book on talking about IBM and productivity when it comes, there's a lot of evidence for the effectiveness of emailing, and there's a lot of evidence that most of the time it just gets in the way. It's like the 80-20 rule, and it's the same idea when you're working with your people. I think if you're super accessible, or the amount that you allow yourself to be accessible, people will always take advantage of that or use that time, right? So whenever Matt started saying, I'm not going to email and I'm going to go to this new system, of course, there are some things that get in the way. But what I think he discovered, and what I even discovered, is if I could shoot him a quick email, I would. Since I can't, I take a little bit longer to figure out, do I really actually need his help on this, or can I just figure it out myself, right? Because most people will respond emotionally. So it's the same with like somebody that works with me. They might say, well, if I know I can just shoot Kyle a text or I can just shoot him an email, I'm going to do it. But if it's like, I'm not going to get my answer.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm not going to get my answer for 24 hours. You start to discover all these emergencies were never really actually truly emergencies. So
did you say you can't text him either?
Doesn't text. He doesn't have Facebook. Well, the best thing you can do if you really have to get a hold of Matt is leave him a voicemail. And a few times a day, he checks his voicemail, but then he processes it on, do I need to call him back like it's a huge emergency? Or can I just look at the information? Yeah, can I hear the information and wait till our next scheduled meeting? Or can I have my assistant schedule a meeting to talk with them about this subject in the future? Yeah. I'm
intrigued. I'm fascinated, and I'm also... Yeah, I'm really interested. Clearly the guy's a master. It sounds great. It's funny. I just put a note on social media because I thought it was quite funny, and maybe I don't know. Maybe some people find it funny. Maybe some think I'm a bit of an idiot. But I just posted. What did I post? I said, "New email policy: stop saying thanks." It's just spam. I'm not an asshole, promise.
Right, exactly.
And a couple of people laughed, and it's so true because like Luke will find this funny. Luke will probably listen to this, and I send emails to Luke almost daily, like asking his opinion, and I'm very specific about the subject because I want to keep it organized. So I'm always like, this one's about this one's about. Because, he's so open and he's such an expert that he's just a great mentor to me, really, and resource, and just a good guy. And so I send these emails, and sometimes he'll always send me back something that's really helpful, and he'll send me back exactly what's required, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes he sends me something, and I'm like, great, I don't need to say I got it, and that's it. That's the end of that topic, right? Or that question. And the funny thing is I want to say, because I don't want to piss him off, and I want to be polite.
Right.
I want to say, thanks, Luke, that's really helpful. But at the same time, I know, knowing him and that he's much like you and I in the way he thinks about productivity, he'll probably be like, no, I don't want the spam.
Exactly.
Obviously, this is very context dependent. If you're very grateful, if someone's really helped you out, then by all means, you want to express that. But there are times...
You have to have that relationship.
You have to have that relationship, and it's very context dependent. I think if you're... sorry, you're right. So, yeah, exactly. So with Luke, where we have emailed back and forth so much, he won't take offense if I don't say thanks. That's what you meant, wasn't it? Yeah.
Exactly.
So you have
it can definitely backfire, but it's the same with the reply all. People get in a big thread and then you reply all. It's like, stop replying all when I'm only talking to one person, and it's just super ineffective.
Totally. And this is the stuff that drove me nuts when I worked for my employer in London, because unfortunately the head of the company wasn't exactly Captain Productive and knew about things like GTD. Not to say he wasn't hugely successful, because he was, but there wasn't that focus on being effective and time management within the business, really, which is unfortunate. And I think that's the same for probably 99% of businesses, in all honesty. But yeah, that stuff drives me mad. The whole reply all thing. God. Yeah, I'm kind of, you're bringing me back now. When I'm talking to you, I'm listening, I'm like, brings me back to having that inbox just full of crap, you know, in that job. And by the way, I'm not saying jobs are bad. Jobs, I mean, you're in a job, Carl, clearly very happy. Jobs are great if you find the right job. So I think sometimes people think I'm like, you know, it's all about being an entrepreneur, all about having your own business. I don't actually believe that at all. I think it's all about just finding meaningful work at the end of the day.
Exactly. But, yeah. And for me, like, again, this will sound cliche, but everybody really runs their own business, especially in our industry, right? If you're a personal trainer and you're part of the perfect workout is whatever that personal trainer is delivering to our clients at that time. It's not me. It's not Matt. It's not our director, Colt. You know, it's none of that stuff. It's really that person. And so it's like the E-Myth. I mean, it's great to have these personalities and to talk about self-development and all these things, but you also, if you don't have real systems in place, then it's going to be an uphill battle the rest of your life. You know? So,
yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we talked about some of the methodology of GTD. I really appreciate your input, and I kind of went way off tangent there, which is fine because that's the podcast, right? That's how it goes. But what can you tell me in your experience, like, and I guess if we can try and, even though the principles apply across multiple industries, but it'd be nice to talk about this in maybe a high intensity sort of business context. What do you see in terms of mistakes people make? You know, maybe looking at some of your direct reports, what are the mistakes people make when it comes to time management that you see?
Oh man. Yeah. Well, that is a good question. I tell you what, playing this idea of this game whack-a-mole, right? Where the little moles pop up all the time and you just whack them when they pop up. It's this idea of like, you're just constantly working through fires and letting things come in and distract you, whether it be a client or another trainer, if you're a facility manager of ours, you know, and you're running a team. So for me, I mean, and again, I'm biased. The big mistake is people don't just implement GTD all the way. But the truth is, some of the common stuff is you get so caught up in the day-to-day and putting out the fires that you really, truly aren't being as effective as you could be or should be. And it's hard to even know that that's happening because everything feels like little wins, right? When you put out a fire, you're like, oh, I did something great today. And,
right. But it's about averting crisis by creating a process so it doesn't happen again, right? Is that what you're getting to?
Exactly. Or even if you're sitting there dealing with a trainer or a client that is not your best and they're not producing or whatever the case may be, is that truly the thing that you should be doing? Or should you be focusing on your A players, the people that are producing the most or the highest levers that you can pull? And most of the time, you're not going to go to that more important lever, so to speak, because the other ones are so loud, right? The issues and the problems and the people that aren't doing what they should be doing. And so without a good system, you know, in place, you're going to be focused on the fires, and there are always going to be fires. And most of the time I find that they're not that important, you know?
Interesting. Okay. What about in terms of like your energy? So I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I drink coffee, probably 2 to 4 cups a day. I don't tend to drink coffee past 2 p.m. because I'm scared I'm going to not be able to go to sleep. Again, I don't know how sensitive I am to it or how I haven't really looked into the research or anything. But how much do you think about your diet and things like drinking coffee in your day-to-day? Like, what does that look like for you? Can you give us maybe a typical day? That'd be interesting.
Yeah, on a typical day for me, on average, let's say over the last year, is I will do some version of intermittent fasting where I just won't eat breakfast, you know, so I try to go 16 hours or so. And but I do drink coffee in the mornings, and I might be 4 to 6 cups. I mean, I just love my coffee. It might sound a little unscientific, but I do believe there's it's kind of like the bulletproof thing. I do believe there are coffees out there that are just cleaner sources of coffee, you know, that can help more with energy compared to just sort of cheaper sources. I feel like I just don't feel as good on them. So yeah, coffee in the morning, starting my day off with reading because I won't read in the evening after a long day. I discovered that. If I've had a long day. So starting my day off with coffee and reading and gratefulness and spending some time with the kids before they go to school, stuff like that, just kind of gets my mindset and energy in the right place before I go into my workflow. And then most days, even like today, I exercised this morning, and I like a whole lot exercising on an empty stomach. But there's also times that I find that if I eat like a couple bananas, my post workout I tend to have a little more energy going into my work rather than feeling like, oh, my blood sugar is so low that I'm just going to spend the rest of my morning a little foggy minded. So
do you find you get a mental hit after a workout? Like you actually you feel quite stimulated mentally? Do you get that?
Yeah, I do. In fact, it's part of the reason I exercised today is I knew I was going to be on this podcast. And maybe this podcast started a little slower from my perspective because I've been so nervous, and you have like some of the best, like Luke and Doug McGuff and James Steele, like David Allen, heroes of mine that are on there. So I'm really honored to be on here. So anyways, I woke up and was like, I need to make sure I get an exercising because hopefully it'll help, carry that going over.
Well, look, you've done great and are doing great, and don't worry about that. But no, I appreciate it. I appreciate that this was up there in the importance for you in terms of what was happening today. So
yeah.
That's cool. And what about your diet? So you do the intermittent fasting thing. I'm very similar. I do exactly the same thing. I often train fasted as well. Do you then what does lunch look like for you?
So the place I've been lately that I find the most success in, and you saw that Instagram post I posted the other day, my weight loss journey recently, and it's not like I'm great at this all the time, even though I'm equally as interested in and passionate about nutrition and even things like herbalism and all that kind of stuff. I just find it fascinating. As I am exercise, but doesn't mean I always kind of practice what I preach, or learn. And so I try, my philosophy right now that works best is on the weekdays, I try to eat just lean meats and veggies and fruit. I've never seen, so I read The Perfect, actually, you know what was the name of that book? Oh gosh, I hope it comes to me.
We can always upload it later.
Yeah, Stephen Guyenet's book on.
Why to Eat. That's Rob Wolf. No, I know the one you mean. Is it Brain something? I know the one you mean, but I can't remember the name.
I'm gonna look real quick while we're talking. But The Hungry Brain.
Hungry Brain. That's it.
That's it. Yeah. So, anyways, and I read Hungry Brain after I had done. I've done every diet under the earth. I've gone 45 days of eating fruitarian, where you only eat fruit.
Wow.
I've done keto, I've done carnivore, I've done high carb, I've done paleo. And so for me, there was things that I was like, you know what? I definitely believe that there are certain foods that are inflammatory, but I haven't seen that weight loss really truly is much more than calorie in, and so in the Perfect Health diet, the Hungry Brain really helped me with that. So because of that, for example, I lost so much weight over a 3-month period of doing the good calorie, bad calorie, sort of low carb, not really technically keto. I find that most people say they're doing keto aren't truly doing keto. And so, but very low carb. And I lost weight and I felt pretty good. And I was like, okay. But then when I went in the opposite direction and started adding in a lot more carbohydrates, I felt better and continued to lose weight as long as my calorie intake was below a certain amount, right? So, and then if I drop my calories too low, my metabolism seems to slow a little bit, and then I perhaps slow my weight loss. So I say all that to say that right now I try to eat lean meats, veggies, and fruits, nuts, things like that, just whole foods during the week, and maybe a glass of wine or two in the evening. I'm really big on the Brain Maker book from Perlmutter. It really gut health stuff and stuff. But then on the weekends, I might be eating pizza, burgers, drinking beer, stuff like that. So I try to apply the 80-20 rule in my diet and nutrition too, because I'm a very social person. And it's just not fun to not go out and have a beer with somebody and eat a piece of pizza.
Here. If you've been listening to the podcast, Carl, I'm very, very similar to that. But do you ever find Mondays challenging, having eaten badly on the weekend? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I definitely do. And I haven't figured that out exactly yet. But if I get to bed at a good time, I'm pretty adamant about being in bed by 9:30 or 10 and doing some little hacks at night, I use magnesium spray. My room's as dark as it can be. I think I read Sleep Smarter earlier this year, and I've tried to incorporate all those things. And a lot of those things I think have helped make sure that even if I had poor nutrition on Sunday or stayed up drinking some beer, which beer and dairy don't respond well to me. I don't know if it's gluten. It could be, but I don't think it is, because when I eat bread, I feel fine. So anyways, long story short, focusing on my sleep has actually made it to where Monday is not as poor as it used to be.
Or just, I suppose, having Saturday as like the cheat day, and then maybe Sunday as a fairly regular day is another way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of what I do. It's interesting. Like I find for me now, and maybe it's partly age related, it's like if I have a massive crazy cheat day, which I did actually on Saturday, which is that correct? Saturday or Sunday, yeah. Which I don't normally do. I haven't done for a long time. It just knocked me out, like energy wise, but also immune system wise. Like I woke up with a bit of a cold, and it's interesting because obviously it's hard to know which variables really are to blame, but it's telling, and so I'm sort of trying to play around with that as well, so that I can relax and enjoy some of these things every now and again, but not to the detriment of the way I feel and productivity and all the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. I was reading something today on the blue zones, and I heard Rob Wolf's another hero, and I saw him at the Paleo FX conference a few months ago.
Cool.
He was talking about, if you study all the blue zones, there's not really actually any commonalities in the as far as the macro ratios go, whether it's certain carbs or certain whatever. And then when you look at blue zones, some of these cultures, it's like, for example, some of them drink a little more heavily and different things like this, but their psychology and their social life and even their religion, things like that are all big commonalities that are super important to them. And, sometimes you can make anything too legalistic, right? If I find that if I focus so much on, if I eat this food, it's going to be bad, or if I eat this cookie, I'm going to have low energy, then I'm actually adding some subconscious stress, right. And then it turns out that way. Where if there's days I'm like, I don't even think about it and I don't anticipate it's going to affect my health and I just enjoy the day, perhaps the next day I do wake up a little more sluggish and stuff, but it's definitely less, exponential than it was before when I used to actually worry about it. So yeah, it's like, make sure you have a good psychology and enjoy your life, and don't stress those things, because sometimes it's like critical thinking, right? We don't even know if half the stuff we think is healthy is truly healthy. So.
Very true. And I like that. I like that mindset. Before we wrap up, Kyle, I just want to ask, what is your current workout look like?
Okay, yeah. So it hasn't changed much over the years. With being with the Perp Workout, I train twice a week for about 15 minutes. We use Nautilus equipment, and we do super slow protocol, which is 10-10. So 10 seconds up, 10 seconds down to complete failure, and try to select a weight that I will, sort of the Doug McGuff thing, that I will hit failure within 1 to 2 minutes, with great form and things like that. I will say, after listening to one of your podcasts, I started, after hitting failure, I started doing 1 to 2 additional drop sets to failure, because I do find that, you might hit neurological failure. It's like the myo rep stuff from, I forget the gentleman's name.
Yeah, Borg Fagali, I think it's how you pronounce
exactly.
it. Yep.
Yeah. And I would say, in my experience, that's not something that's necessary for 95% of our clients, because they might not be at the level that we are, right? But
yeah, because we're just jacked.
We're just jacked. Yeah, we're just too strong. Yeah. So, anyways, so I've definitely seen some improvements, even if it's just maybe a little more fun, and that's a stupid word to say when it comes to hitting muscle fatigue and failure, but it's just a little more fun on my psychology.
I do. So, what's the workout look like? What's the routine like?
So yeah, I will do anywhere from, let me think, I worked out this morning. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 10 exercises, mostly using Nautilus machines. I might use free weights if I'm doing like a bicep curl, but I'm really just hitting the major body, like a tricep machine or leg press or compound row, and to failure, and then move on from there, from that muscle group. So 10 seconds, like I said, each direction until I hit muscle failure. I'll then drop the weights a little bit, try to get another 2 to 3 reps at that same tempo until I hit failure again. And then, I get off the chest press and go work on a different body group.
Is it like an A-B routine, or is it the same routine twice a week?
Yeah, full body twice a week. Give myself a few days to recover. So I train today on Tuesday. I'll take the next 2 days and not train, and I'll train on Friday. Then I might train again Monday. I try to give myself about 2 days in between training.
Cool. And just before I get your contact details for listeners, what are your favorite time management books? I mean, we touched on some of these already, but it'd be good to create like a short list for the listeners.
Okay, time management. Yeah, because I love books in general. I could talk about all this stuff, philosophy, leadership.
Top 5 would be good.
Top 5 time management, I would say, obviously getting things done. And honestly, every book David Allen has written, gosh, I can't remember the titles of his other ones off the top of my head.
Right.
And then Deep Work, I think, is a phenomenal book. The 80-20 Principle.
Yeah.
And then The One Thing, I think, is a brilliant book on time management. And then it's kind of funny, like this might be a weird thing to say, but have you read Thinking Fast and Slow?
I have not, but I've had lots of people recommend that to me.
So that might be in my top books of all time, like top 5 of all time.
Wow.
And the reason I throw it in with time management, even though it doesn't really have anything to do with it, is it's so much on critical thinking and the way that your mind works that I find that it's super valuable, even when it comes down to, your time management, the things that you're doing on any given day. So
cool. I was surprised. Well, not surprised because there's so many time management books out there, but I really like Essentialism. Have you read that?
I have read Essentialism. Yeah. I find that it relates a lot to The One Thing. And honestly,
they're all very similar, aren't they?
Yeah. I could easily throw Essentialism in my top list too.
Yeah. Cool.
Or things like Flow or Willpower. I mean, a lot of these books are just, to me, it's not like you can read one. The more that you read on this topic and subject, the more you kind of shift your paradigm and get even better at creating those new habits.
Do you know what I think is a good way to also wrap this up is, I don't know how much you agree with this. I once heard Tim Ferriss say, as you go through life, as you grow, as you learn, as you pick up this new information, you do upgrade your operating system subconsciously without knowing it. And you'll start behaving, acting, making decisions slightly differently than you did previous. And I think we worry sometimes that we're not learning, because we're overwhelmed by all this information. And I just want to say to listeners, like, rest assured, not everyone reads these books and remembers everything. It's just about picking up a few things that you find useful. And there's a saying that is, the good shit sticks. If it's really important, it's going to help you, you'll remember it. And it's a process. And I think it's just amazing when I think about myself now. Sorry, my dog's just acting so strange. She's just hiding underneath this blanket on the sofa. It's just kind of odd. But anyway.
Something about my voice, probably.
Well, she can't hear it, but...
All right.
So I've totally lost my train of thought. But no, I think... what was I saying? Upgrading operating system. Good stuff sticks.
Yeah. And you're going through the process and you feel like, most of the time you're not learning or you're not changing, your mindset or your actions or things like that. So, and sometimes I find like people say that and it's like, why read, and because of that reason. And I also believe, this sounds a little nerdy, but talking about GTD, it really is good to process the books that you read, like really write down the behaviors that you hope to have, to be different, after you read that book. So in my weekly review, I actually have this little title called Behaviors. And then there's all kinds of nuggets I've gotten from books that I'm like, well, the truth is, and if you work backwards, there's this idea of, and we didn't get to talk about culture today, but there's this idea of, if you really want to get towards your passion, it's really going to be made up of your character. And your character is only really the sum of all of your habits. And your habits are really made up of the actions that you have. And you don't really change your actions until you change your belief system. And also, the actions are sort of synonymous with your behaviors. And so when you read a book, it's great and it's good to have a concept, but you'll be even more productive, I think, at creating change from that book or that material if you take some of those nuggets and put them somewhere that you're reviewing them every so often as behavior. I'm not saying reread the book or even like beat yourself up if you're like, I'm not doing that. But over time, if I glance at this one principle from The One Thing and I put a little behavior there about it, I find that I end up evolving into doing better with that, later in life.
I like, when it comes to reading as well, I really like following I typically follow the just-in-time rule rather than the just-in-case when it comes to reading. So only reading stuff I need or consuming information I need when I need it. I'm sure you probably follow a similar principle because we're so overwhelmed by information that it's impossible to obviously process it all. However, where I break that rule is where I'm just curious about something and I just want to learn about it. I recently read Martin Berkhan's new book, Lean Gains. I read it in like 2 days because I started just reading some of his stuff randomly and I got really into some of his writing. And, actually it was kind of good. It was kind of good timing because I was interested at that point in changing certain things about my training or diet. So it was quite useful. But it was more so the passion, the curiosity, you know.
Right.
You know, I recently reread Effective Executive because it's that's my favorite time management book, and probably 4-Hour Work Week's up there too, but that's probably my favorite. And it's just a book like that, timeless books like that, like the top books. You constantly go back to them and they bring you something new and you learn something new. I mean, I read this book when I was in Mexico on holiday, and I don't know what it is, but it just didn't resonate with me. Like I couldn't understand everything. And now I read it again and I'm a bit smarter and a bit more, I understand a little bit better. So when I read it, it makes more sense to me and I can implement it. So I do think
it might apply to your life more so now than even the time that you read it.
Right. So I do think there are some books that are good to revisit, but I also think, you know, if you just really want to read the book for the hell of it because you're just fascinated, you're just curious, then go for it. Don't fall into trap like I have sometimes of being like, well, that's not going to serve me now, so I'm not going to read it. That's
exactly
quite silly. I think.
If I a couple of things there. If I find that I'm losing interest in a book, and I would say this to your listeners, then stop reading it. You know,
yes,
maybe you come back
absolutely.
to it. Maybe you never come back to it, but. And I might be reading a book and I always feel like I need to be reading and learning for, you know, business related and self-development, but I might go through a period where I really only read on nutrition or philosophy or, you know, the mind or something like that, because it's just what's interesting to me at the time. And because it's interesting, like you said, I'm going to retain more, and it's going to, all of the learning and just reading in general helps your mind think a little more critically in each moment. Right. So it's just even the process. And then I don't know if you've heard of the app Blinkist.
Yes. Yeah, Blinkist.
So I started using Blinkist about a couple of weeks ago, and it has been a game changer because what I'll do is read the book like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and then I'm like, I remember some of the principles, etc. But then Blinkist, you can go get the full recap of the book in like 20 minutes, and it's just audio, and it's just brilliant. So, anyways, Blinkist is I would recommend that to people.
Yeah, good stuff. Man, we could talk about this stuff for hours, but you know, Carl, I'm sure you've got many more important things to do today. Many lists to process.
Right.
What is the best way for people to find out more about you and get in touch with what you're involved in?
Oh gosh, you know, theperfectworkout.com is our company's website. Obviously, when it comes to me in general, I don't know how to answer that because I don't really feel like I'm doing it outside of it. Yeah, check out my Instagram, Kyle. So Kyle Recchia is how you pronounce my last name, or Facebook or something like that. I don't know if I post anything useful in those places, but social media, ironically, is probably the best way. Okay, or cool. My email address, if somebody wants to email me, it's kyle.recchia@theperfectworkout.com.
Cool, and I'll put all of that in the show notes. And to find the show notes for this episode, guys, please go to corporatewarrior.co/Kyle. That's KYLE. And for all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.co/podcast. It's been great, Carl. Thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it. And until next time, guys, next time those listening, thank you very much, and I will talk to you soon.
Discover how to improve health, become a great personal trainer, and build a successful high-intensity strength training business. Check out corporatewarrior.co. corporatewarrior.co.
This episode is brought to you by ARX, the most innovative, efficient, and effective all-in-one exercise machines I have ever seen. I was really impressed with my ARX workout. The intensity and adaptive resistance was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I love how the machine enables you to increase the negative load to fatigue target muscles more quickly, and I love how the workouts are effortlessly quantified. The software tracks maximum force output, rate of work, total amount of work done, and more in front of you on screen, allowing you to compete with your previous performance to give you and your clients real-time motivation. The ARX uses a computer-controlled motor to give you the exact amount of resistance your clients need 100% of the time. This means that the resistance can never become dangerous, is intuitive and simple to use, and can provide you with all of the results you and your clients are looking for in a fraction of the time. ARX is highly effective and efficient in delivering all of the benefits of exercise, including increased strength, muscle mass, cardiovascular conditioning, bone mineral density, and injury recovery. As well as being utilized by many high-intensity trainers to deliver highly effective and efficient workouts to their clients, ARX comes highly recommended by world-class trainers and brands, including Bulletproof, Tony Robbins, and Ben Greenfield Fitness. To find out more about ARX and get $500 off install when you place an order, please go to arxfit.com and mention Corporate Warrior in the How Did You Hear About Us field. So again, to get $500 off install when you order, head on over to arxfit.com and enter Corporate Warrior in the How Did You Hear About Us field.